welcome. Thanks for joining us. Feel free to put where you're calling in from today in the chat. I know we've got some folks that are joining us from different places. And Tracy, it's good to see you. Saw that you just joined. South Florida, we have Austin, Chicago, British Columbia, Ottawa, Stockholm, Sweden. Thanks for staying late with us, Kelly, today. Got a couple of us in Atlanta as well. It's like, David, we should have gotten together for this one.
I know, right? We could have just
Yeah.
found a neutral space, just right in the middle of Piedmont Park. We'll just set up a table.
You know what? I'm in downtown right now, so close enough.
There we go.
I am going to go ahead and get started. I think just because we've got a really rich conversation today, so I definitely want to make sure that we have as much time as possible for Kelly and David's conversation. I also know we're going to be recording the first part of this conversation for the content here. When we get ready to go into breakout groups, we're also going to turn off the recording so that you all feel comfortable of, you're here to have real conversations and to share what's happening within your organization. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. Before I introduce David and Kelly here, my name is Noelle London. I'm the founder and CEO of Illuminous. I'm joined here by Marcus on the Illuminous team as well. For those of you who don't know us, we are an AI-powered employee data platform. So essentially what we do is pull together data from across various HR systems that don't talk to each other, map out the employee journey to help you turn your data into insights. We also are really passionate about the power of community. It's part of the reason that we started Illuminous. So we're super excited to tee up with the people managing people team here because they create great community as well. So our goal for today, as you're walking away, is that hopefully you meet a new friend that you can call up as you're hoping to, work through some of these HR challenges that you're dealing with. We're going to be sharing a resource list that this crew here putting on the event has put together in preparation for this so that you have some resources on these topics. And then I hope that you leave here with a best practice. So we're really excited about all of the experience that Kelly and David are going to share. So that's our goal for today. Just to give you a little bit of a view on what today's going to look like, we're first going to kick off, and we're super excited about the topic of turning people ops into your secret weapon. We are really fortunate to be joined by a great speaker in this space that's going to share more of how she's implementing this within her organization. And then we're going to then, hope that that kind of starts teeing up some ideas around what you're seeing within your organizations. We're then going to break out into small groups so that you can talk a little bit more about some of the practices that you're seeing within your organizations, talk through some of the things that you're working through. And then we'll briefly come back together, get some of your feedback, and then let you get back to it because we know you've all got a lot going on. So with that, I'm going to move over to start kicking off our fireside chat here. We're so excited about this topic. For those of you who have been joining us for some time now for these kinds of events, it feels like every time that we get together, we're talking about how HR is changing. And that's a kind of part of the topic that we're having again today. But many of you probably saw that recently Bolt CEO put out announcements saying that they were killing HR. They're moving from HR into people ops. And this was really curious for me because it's part of this conversation of what does HR and IT have to do with each other? How are they coming together? And so when we saw this headline, we were like, wait, Kelly's over at Bolt, and Kelly's been doing some really cool stuff around people ops. We've got to have her come and talk to us about what this looks like and what she's doing within the organization. So we're super proud to be joined today by Kelly. Kelly has a background in HR. She is currently the head of people operations at Bolt. She's been with Bolt for some time and has been bringing some, really interesting programs around culture systems. They're super focused on high performing teams. And when we started having the conversation with Kelly about what this looked like, we knew that we needed to open up the conversation and have the opportunity to have her share with you all. Kelly is going to be joined by David Rice, who is our co-host for this particular session. And David is the executive editor and the host of the People Managing People podcast. Many of you are probably very familiar with this podcast. I know that it's on my list and one of my go-tos. But David always has a really great perspective on what's happening within AI and HR. He's got a background in journalism, came into the HR space and has really been playing a really strong leadership role within the space. So we're so excited to have both of them spend a little bit of time with us today. They're going to introduce themselves and more on them as we get into it. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them. And then I'll be back in a little bit to talk about our breakout sessions. But Kelly and David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, excellent. Noel, thank you. As Noel said, my name's David Rice. I'm the executive editor for People Managing People. I host all of our events, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So, Kelly, well, welcome. I'll let you
Yeah,
introduce
thank
yourself.
you. Yeah, Noel did a great job. But super excited to be here. I think it's always important to have leaders in the space come together and talk about, Noel, as you put, the ever-changing environment and landscape of what we do every day. So yeah, excited to be here. I think Noel did a great job of my introduction so far. So let's kick it off. Get into it.
All right, excellent. Well, okay, so as we started talking about this, my first thought was eliminating HR, right? What does that actually mean inside your organization? I mean, we've all kind of heard the term people operations sort of in place of HR. I think some people kind of use them interchangeably. I'm curious, like what was this? Was it a rebranding, a restructuring, a sort of a philosophical overhaul? How did everybody have to think about it differently?
Yeah, for sure. I think from a high level, it is and was a mentality shift in how we thought about how we serve the business. I think too, there was some structural changes internally, but we didn't, as maybe the post originally sounded like, kind of cut the entire HR team, but rather did some slight restructuring and really shifted how we think about how HR or people ops serves the business and where we are today. I think from a high level perspective, and to your point, it can sometimes those terms are used interchangeably, but from how we were thinking about it, HR is a little bit more, companies take HR systems and plug them into their company as needed, whereas we want to kind of diagnose the problems first from a people ops perspective, and then work backwards in that way so that we are working really efficiently, not putting kind of systems and processes that are not needed in the business there. We went through a really interesting transition a couple of years ago where we were a much larger company, and because of the economic and macro environment, we had to scale down and reduce our headcount. So we actually went through this process a little bit then in terms of what's not serving us anymore, what served us when we were over 1,000 people, and what's not working when we're 200, 150, 130 people. So really having this mindset shift of what's the problem and how can we solve that through people systems, through business support and what we need versus we have to have a performance review process because that's what HR says we have to do. We have to have, X, Y, and Z. So really figuring out what the problem was and solving backwards from that way.
As you start thinking about how you're going to solve backwards, one of the things that comes to my mind is like, we put employees through a 30, 60, 90 plan, but if we were thinking about a 30, 60, 90 plan for this transition, what is that how do you kind of map that out?
Yeah, I think the first 30 days is, and again, this isn't, I would say, wasn't a like overnight shift, right? We've kind of been going through this over time, and kind of come to the realization that this is how we need to move forward and how we need to think about things. So I think it's first looking at what we have in place, and making sure that it's continuing to serve us and having hard conversations. I think change can be hard, and those, taking that performance review example, like, well, we've always had performance reviews, and asking the question of, well, what happens if they're not serving us in the way that we need them to? How can we shift them? Do we actually need them in the way that we're using them now? So I think the first part of that is asking questions. I think there's kind of maybe some categories that you can think of in terms of, how do the people side of what we're doing affect the bottom line, affect revenue, affect business operations? Can we put kind of metrics into that? So I've spent a lot of time in the first 30-ish days looking at metrics like employee lifetime value and candidate acquisition costs, and just really getting kind of granular in those things and understanding where we are and how that affects our bottom line as a company. Getting to know our finance team a little bit better. And then also kind of from a values perspective, how do these things fit into who we are as a company, what we value? Do we still have the same set of values? Do we need to rethink those or reinterpret them at all? And then I think the third part of that is just how we work as a company. And I think any company, this will not be the same for anyone, right? It'll all be unique, their own unique kind of thumbprint. We are a 100% remote company, global company. So the systems and ways of working that we have are going to be different than a hybrid or an office company. So I think thinking about those three aspects, kind of the financial and those metrics, values, how does what we're doing kind of align with those values, and then the ways of working, and does it fit into how we actually work, and how does it make sense? So I don't know if I can define kind of 30-60 with those, but I would say that's the kind of first stage, right, of what we did. And then it's like, okay, based on those metrics, maybe what's highest priority? What's going to kind of move the needle the most, and really work to prioritize those, and being able to have those sometimes hard conversations of, do we actually need what we thought we needed? Maybe it served us then. Does it still serve us now?
I like that you started with the connecting with the finance folks, like right out the gate. That's a good place to start talking about metrics and start talking
Yeah,
about, like
it's a little
what the
scary at
expect.
first.
Right. Yeah. Well, they all,
Because
the finance folks always are. So
yeah, exactly. But once you break down the barrier, I found, and started asking the questions, then there's a path to collaboration and conversation that I've really appreciated, and I think the finance team has as well.
absolutely. You mentioned, performance reviews. We got to have them because HR has always said that we do. And it's just sort of these legacy HR practices and mindsets. Did you all have to kind of unlearn or retire some of that? And how did your team respond to that? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think I actually just had a conversation about this today in terms of where we are on performance reviews. I think we've had a bit of an evolution of kind of dwindling down our performance reviews in terms of making sure that they are really high impact and low lift as much as possible, and finding that balance. And I think we are like continuously iterating on that. I would say feedback from people has been like joyous, because they don't have to spend a lot of time doing peer reviews or doing complicated metrics and understanding scoring and calibration and things like that. So there's some relief from the manager side. We didn't just say, okay, we're not doing performance reviews at all. We still like pay for performance, and it's still something that we rely on, but we're doing it in a way, again, that solves and how we work, right? That solves kind of that problem of like, how can we make this integrated into the way that we're already working? How can we integrate this into Slack? We all live in Slack all day at Bolt. And how can we make this that it's actually serving people, right? Because I don't know if I've had a specific like performance review conversation where I've walked away and been like, oh, now I know exactly how I'm going to, be a better employee now, or how I'm going to reach my goals now. Because after that conversation, it typically the conversations don't follow up. It's kind of like you have these big conversations twice a year, whatever process you have, and then it just kind of fizzles out. So we're trying to solve for that problem too, keeping the lift low, keeping the feedback continuous, and also still making sure that our process and our pay structure is paid for high performers.
So as you're kind of looking at it now from where you are, if you were sort of to blueprint this people ops model right now, what would be some non-negotiables for that? Like what have you found are the sort of key pillars?
Yeah, I think some of the things that I mentioned in terms of those finance friends and those metrics, I think it's being able to understand what you need to prioritize on, because this can feel like a very big shift and change from what has been the standard for a long time. And so it can be hard to understand where to start, and it can feel very overwhelming. If you have these metrics I don't think are perfect. And again, they should be tailored to the specific business, where you are, where your business is, where you are in terms of kind of growth. So there's a lot of different models out there. And I think I linked to some in the resource page that we'll send out later. But I think being able to have a dashboard that you can look at and say, okay, this is where we actually need to focus in on and prioritize on to, make sure that we're in a kind of positive flow of how we're bringing people on versus the spend and revenue generation. So really breaking it down kind of black and white in that, and then understanding, like, layering on those other pillars of like, okay, well, how is this going to make for a employee experience that people are going to want to keep coming back to? Kind of putting the human aspect on top of it. But I think having that baseline and that kind of blueprint of what do I need to do to be impactful? Where do I need to start? And then going from there.
As you've done this, you mentioned there sort of going back to that experience piece. I'm curious because so much of, I mean, AI is playing a role in I think all of our experiences these days, right?
Yeah.
So how are you prioritizing the development of sort of human capabilities, things like empathy, feedback, adaptability within your teams, and how people connect?
Yeah. I think there's I like to think of almost dividing how we think about this in terms of what can AI help humans be better at versus replace the human touch. So using it as an add-on and an enhancer rather than a replacement, especially in a function like people ops or HR. I think there's still the need for a lot of human backstop, a lot of human interaction and high touch with this. So an example is we're actually just piloting a AI tool integrated into Slack for some of our managers, that it'll kind of learn how our managers interact with their team and then provide tips on how to give effective feedback to a specific employee based on some input that the employee has given from like an operating manual kind of questionnaire. Also those interactions that it's learning about, the AI is learning about. It'll say how to have more effective one-on-ones with those employees, how to give more effective feedback, how to help them align with their goals more effectively, right? So all of that information we're giving to the manager, but it's not replacing the manager. It's giving them extra information. It's pulling data together and context together, and then allowing the manager to be able to utilize that. Because I sure don't want to get feedback from an AI bot. I want to get it from my manager. But if my manager can use AI to pull in a lot of different resources and data points to be able to have those conversations more effectively, then I think that's a win. So really using it as a supplement then instead of taking it over.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think a lot of what the research that we're seeing right now, it shows that people want some level of AI involved in their management process. They don't necessarily want to be managed by the AI, but
Yeah.
they do want you to use it, and they do want to see how you're using it as well and understand it.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as you've started to do that and you're seeing it, help managers, has that had a knock-on effect for your talent development strategy at all? Has it changed as you're moving towards this?
I'll let you know. We kind of just started this pilot program, so a little too early to tell. We've done something sort of similar within speaking of performance reviews, when we do have those moments where we're asking managers to talk about career development, for example. We've kind of replaced those more traditional performance review conversations with career development conversations, because feedback should be continuous, right? And they should always be talking about that. So we've used this in terms of that data pulling functionality that AI can have, and are using a tool that can have employees talk about their career development, be able to take feedback that an employee has received from their peers throughout the year, and being able to pull all of that into kind of one kind of talking point, or one data points, bullet points that then the manager can have really effective conversations with. So a little bit similar to the Slack integration, but kind of more specifically focused on the career development. And we've seen that people are actually having these conversations, whereas before they were talking about having them, but not actually having them, because it was just too overwhelming, I think, to gather the data and to understand what to do with it. So we've given people that, here's the data, here's what to do with it. We've also put on top of that some human manager training and workshops of, here's what to do with that data, here's how to have effective career development conversations. So we're kind of layering it together. And I'm sure I hope we'll shift and change as we learn more too. And but right now we're seeing these conversations happening, and these career development OKRs and ways that people want to develop professionally actually be a part of the conversation, where previously they just weren't as much part of the conversation at all.
I'm curious. You mentioned metrics. You brought up OKRs there, and the sort of identifying different metrics earlier. You were talking about that, and I wanted to ask you sort of how you all measure success evolved at all. Like what metrics or signals matter more, maybe post transformation.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's something that I'm working on ongoing. Something I'm working on right now. I think before we looked at attrition,
Mm.
turnover, regrettable turnover, and understood what that metric was. Okay, we have a lot of turnover. We don't have a lot of turnover. We're doing great. We're not doing great. ENPS, we also measured and continue to measure on top of that. But I think those are all points, but they don't maybe show the full picture. So I've added on these other metrics that I was talking about, like the ELTV and the cost of hire and things like that, that I think can continue to be a little bit more of a kind of simulation exercise too. So
Mm.
if you're saying, okay, if I really focus in on onboarding and ramp up time and try to use AI to make our ramp up quicker and to get people on board faster, then I can see how that will directly kind of increase the employee lifetime value metric. So I'm using it more in kind of a simulation aspect now, but I think that there's just a broader viewpoint of how we define success versus we have maybe one or two metrics that's not a living metric, I guess.
I'm curious, looking at what you've seen so far, what you know now, sort of about this transition from thinking of it as HR to more of this people ops focus.
Yeah.
What do you think this function will look like in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. I think it will go kind of even the next step. I'm always thinking of okay, this is the thing that we're talking about and focusing on now. And I'm always thinking about what are we going to be talking about in 5 years or 1 year or 10 years, and where is that going to go? And I think that people ops is going to continue to be even more integrated into the business. I think there will be more of a way of looking at this from a kind of workflow perspective. And I think Noel mentioned like IT and HR and how those fit together. I think there will just be more integration, more and more integration into the business and how people think about people ops, not as an add-on, but as a, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Not as an add-on, but as a like really strategic lever for the business. I hope to be able to do even more kind of predictive people ops tools and thought processes too, and really using data and AI to be more predictive. And I don't want to give the impression that I'm like only in the data, but I think it's a really good way to think about as a baseline and then layer on the engagement and how do we make this an actual place where people are going to love to work and want to keep coming back. I know talk about it as people as a product, right? How do we make sure that people are going to want to continue to subscribe to our product, to subscribe to wanting to work at Bolt or wherever it may be? So that's why my goal is to kind of make this more of a predictive function and also just continue to be integrated more into workflows, be seen more as a even a revenue driver, because we are in effect, because we're supporting the people who are doing that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's going to become even more pronounced, as we keep looking at how people interface with technology. That's just going to continue to change and become, I don't want to say bizarre, but in some ways, yeah.
Yeah,
So
totally.
no,
Yeah, we have to
Noel.
balance, right?
Yeah,
The
we do.
the data and the people.
Noel, do we have time for one more question or do we need to get to the breakout rooms?
We do need to get to the breakout groups, but I'm so loving this conversation. I will let David, if you've got one more burning question, otherwise we can go to our
Well,
groups.
I just wanted to ask Kelly, if you're talking to somebody who's thinking about starting this shift from HR to people ops and sort of defining that, if you could give them one piece of advice to begin that process, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it would be to don't feel like you need to do everything at once. To take something that you think is meaningful and focus in on that. I think that small changes over time is going to be more effective and more impactful than trying to um, do everything at once. And I have that tendency to be like, okay, I have this great idea. Now I'm gonna, want to go do it and implement it everywhere. But being able to focus in and make small, meaningful changes is what's going to actually move the needle. And talk to people internally, talk to your team, go cross functional, talk to finance, talk to other leaders within the org, and understand what their pain points are and actually what your problem is that you're trying to solve for. Because I think the transition to people ops will look different for every single person and every single company that does it. So figure out what you're trying to solve and go from there.
Excellent advice. Well, Noel, I'm gonna pass it back to you.
Wonderful. I've got to say that's probably one of the first times, Kelly, that I've ever heard the idea of your role and your shift right now is about editing, because so much of what we hear is that HR is having more and more put on your plate. And so thinking about what actually makes sense, what can I take off my plate right now? I think feels almost liberating in a way of like, what do I need to stop doing?